Hello and welcome to Repair Cafe TV. I'm Don Fick and I'll be your host as we explore the world of repair. Normally, a Repair Cafe is an in-person event, a workshop, where local volunteer coaches help area residents repair common household items. In the process, everyone learns new skills, saves a little money, and breaks the cycle of throw away and buy new. During the pandemic, we're producing these online events to keep the spirit of repair alive in homes and communities worldwide. We hope you will see a little of the curiosity, excitement, and satisfaction that is common during our in-person workshops. I know from our registrations that we'll be joined by attendees from across the globe, including here in North Carolina, as well as New York, Colorado, California, Canada, Australia, and many other places. During the Zoom-based program, we're going to be using the Zoom webinar package. So most people on the call will not be visible. You're not sharing your video or audio during the call. You'll see only our repair coaches and then maybe one guest at a time who might be asking questions or presenting their repair project. There is a chat feature in Zoom, which you're welcome to use during the call. You can contribute comments, post links, or make suggestions during the call. And just to test that out, make sure that everybody knows where that is, I'd like you to go ahead and give it a try by just looking for that chat icon and maybe at the bottom of your screen or on a more menu, and go ahead and share with everybody where you're calling in from tonight. So what city, state, or country you might be in. And then everybody can see that scroll by, and we can see we've got people coming in from, wow, all over. Let's see, New York, Iowa, here near Durham, North Carolina, Colorado, Chapel Hill. We've got folks coming in from everywhere. So that's great to see. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, tonight's event is part of our summer series of special presentations and discussions on common repair topics. Today, Cheryl Warren and Beccah Hunter will be exploring basic sewing machine maintenance. In a couple weeks, on August 19th, Kathy Murphy will explain tools and techniques of basic jewelry repair. And on September 16th, I'll be leading a discussion about glue and the best glue to use for some common household repair tasks. Everyone is welcome to attend any of these. They are all free. There's never a cost to attend one of our virtual repair events. And you can find more information and register by visiting repaircafe.tv. So today's coaches are volunteers from Repair Cafe NC, which serves the Triangle region of North Carolina. And we also have coaches from WNC Repair Cafe, which is based in Western North Carolina. And we're also want to share that Repair Cafe TV is made possible by a grant from the Wake County Solid Waste Management Division. Wake County is located in the central region of North Carolina. It's the home to Raleigh, Cary, and Wake Forest, as well as other cities. And as many of you know, North Carolina is being visited by a hurricane this evening. It's raining intermittently here. It's forecast to get worse. So if for some reason we lose power or lose our network connections, I just ask you to be patient while we independently try to get ourselves reconnected. So in recent months, many people are just rediscovering sewing. You may have a vintage sewing machine or a modern electric model. Cheryl Warren is here to demonstrate some basic maintenance and how to avoid common problems. Cheryl has been restoring antique and vintage sewing machines for 10 years. She began with a Singer treadle that had been in the family for 3 generations, and the thrill of bringing it back to life was instantly addictive. Although she has no formal training, Cheryl has found that vintage sewing machine community is very generous about sharing knowledge. Tomorrow, I encourage you to visit Cheryl's blog, Dragon Poodle Studio, where she has documented many of her restoration projects. And in a few minutes, Beccah Hunter will be joining Cheryl. Beccah's main experience lies in metalsmithing and jewelry. Her day job as a software engineer includes experience with electronics and computer hardware. Beccah began sewing when her grandmother taught her to sew as a child, and like many of you, lately she's been sewing masks. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Cheryl, and you can begin your presentation, Cheryl.
Welcome to Repair Cafe TV Sewing Machines Special Edition. I love sewing machines. I've been sewing since I was 12, and I've been sewing passionately since I was 14. And as Don told you, I've been restoring machines for the last 10 years. Tonight, we're going to look at three very different types of sewing machines. Oops. There we go. Let me back out here. And for some reason, my screen is reversed. I don't know what's going on. Didn't work this way. So although it looks like it's backwards, and I really don't know why the image is reversed here, we're going to look at a modern computerized sewing machine. As long as you're not trying to read the words on it, this won't matter. We're going to look at a very complicated vintage sewing machine from the 1960s. And we'll find out that maintenance on that is, oh, thanks, Ted, for the feedback. He says the image is fine on your side. We're going to look at this the most complicated vintage machine that I have, but we're going to discover that maintenance isn't any harder on that than any other machine. And then finally, we're going to finish up with a quick look at a 1928 Singer straight stitcher, which is as simple as they come. Now I'm doing this on my camera on my phone, so you're going to have to bear with me since I don't have a videographer in the studio with me. So we're going to start with this electronic or computer machine. And with these machines, what not to do is more important than what you should do. It's, I think, important to have an owner's manual for this machine. And if you bought yours secondhand and it doesn't have an owner's manual, check the website of the manufacturer first. And then another good place to find manuals is on Facebook groups and the old-fashioned things we used to call bulletin boards. And you want to look for a group specific to the make and model of your machine, or for the vintage Japanese machines. There are specific bulletin boards and Facebook groups for vintage Japanese. If you just get on a general sewing machine board, you may find quickly that there's as much bad information online as there is good information. So I've been weeding through all that for the last 10 years. So on this electronic machine, I'm going to attempt to show you the page that shows the maintenance instruction in the manual for this machine. And really the only thing that you're supposed to do as the owner is keep the lint out of it. And I'm going to show you how to do that. On other machines, we'll be seeing that you can clean and oil and lube them. But on this machine, if we look at it, there are no screws anywhere for you to remove any of the plastic casing, not on the top, not on the sides, not on the back, not underneath. And there are no holes to drip oil into. So no screw holes, no oil holes, no oil. One thing that you can do with these machines, with any machine, and from this point out, all of my information is going to apply to all machines, is you can change the light bulbs. And there are two common type of sewing machine light bulbs. One of them has a screw base, as you can see here. And it goes in and out as easily as screwing in a light bulb. The other type has what's called a bayonet base, and you can see little nibs on the sides. And in the receptacle for this, there will be grooves. So you have to orient the nibs properly to the grooves, slide it up and give it a twist to seat it properly. And when that happens, you should be able to turn the light bulb on. Really can recommend replacing these with an LED bulb. And if you buy these online, buy them from someone who's selling sewing machine bulbs, and that will let you input the make and model of your machine so that you get the right one. This would be too long for something where this one just fit. But you get a lot more light out of these and they don't get hot. Lint is the biggest problem that routine maintenance can take care of. Before this, as we were registering people, someone asked, are different types of thread harder on the machine? And there are people with expensive machines who make the claim that their machine only likes certain types of thread. I haven't found that to be true in my own experience. The difference in quality of thread is how it's manufactured and how much lint comes off of it. And no matter what type of thread you're using, lint will build up over time and you have to remove it. So underneath the needle of the sewing machine, you will see what we call a throat plate, and I'm going to zoom in now if I may. All right, so I'm going to move the camera in. So this is a sewing machine throat plate, and this one on this machine has two parts. That covers up the bobbin area, and I have removed the screws on all these machines already because that takes a little time. So just in the interest of time, the screws are often, there's a very narrow place here, and so you're going to need a short screwdriver. This screwdriver I bought from a sewing machine supply place. The woman just recently retired, and I don't have someone that I've used that I can recommend for you, but this will fit neatly under there. And at the hardware store, the local big box store, I got a screwdriver shaped like this, which will also fit under there. So this one has one screw hole, some of them have two. And when you take that throat plate out, you can see into the bobbin area of the machine. And you can, I don't know how well you can see, but there's considerable lint buildup in this machine. This is a traditional sewing machine lint brush that works fine. I also use makeup brushes that never got used for makeup, and this is actually my favorite one to use. You can also use pipe cleaners made for pipes, and one of my friends told me you can also use gun cleaners made for guns, but you don't want the type of pipe cleaner that's extra fuzzy for craft projects because you don't want to put more lint down in there. And so I'm going to swish my makeup brush around in here, and I think you can see that I didn't clean it the last time I put it away because I got this machine out for this demonstration. So I was glad to find a machine that had some lint in it so that I could show you the lint inside the machine. The camera shenanigans will go on for the entire presentation. Controversially, you can use canned air. Many of the people who make recommendations about sewing machines tell you not to do this for two reasons. It may have a residue in it, although on this can it says no residue. The other reason they say not to do it is that you're driving the dust farther into the machine. Underneath the bobbin area, there's not a lot of doings to worry about, and I don't know if you can see the dust flying all over the place. I've been using these for 15 years and they haven't caused me any problems, but I wanted to alert you that that's a somewhat controversial point of view. On the throat plate here, there's a place where, get it up close here. The needle is going through right here. And there are times when your needle will be deflected. It often happens if you're sewing something very thick, like perhaps hemming jeans, or perhaps you're pushing or pulling the fabric through the machine, which is bad practice. You should just let the sewing machine feed dogs, feed the work through the machine, but if it can happen. So if your needle is deflected and it strikes the throat plate here, you can find little irregularities, strikes or burrs on the machine. Your fingertip is very sensitive. If you can feel a strike or a burr there, you can remove that with some 400 grit sandpaper and just lightly sand that off. If it shouldn't go through to the back unless something really horrendous happened, but you can sand it off back there too. And if you have an antique machine where this is just a tiny little hole, you can buy something called abrasive cord that you can run through there and smooth the insides of that hole. The reason you want to do this is that as the thread goes through there, if it gets caught on any of those burrs, it can impede the flow of the thread through the machine, and that can cause you a lot of problems. So while we're talking about burrs, and we're talking about 400 grit sandpaper, you can also feel on the tip of the needle with your finger if there's a burr on the needle. Needles will get dull or blunt from repeated sewing. Another question we had ahead of time was how often do we change the needle? And people that sell you needles will tell you that you should put a new one in with every project. And that's not a bad practice. That way you always have a nice fresh needle, no problem. I tend to replace them when I break them. And if I find that my needle has gotten dull, sometimes it'll make a sort of a popping sound. You can hear that needle punching through the cloth, or you might see a larger hole than you would expect. And I'm going to pretend this is a needle because it's bigger. You can just take your 400 grit sandpaper and just run it back and forth, rotating the needle, and get that burr off. And it works really well. It won't work forever, but if you're in the middle of a project and you don't have any extra needles, it could really save your bacon now and then. Okay. I want to say just a word about thread. Thread is an enormous subject, which I'm not really going to deal with much, but I love thrift stores and I buy a lot of vintage things at thrift stores. I like these little wooden spools of thread because they're so cute and they're nice decorative accessories. But old cotton thread, even fairly new cotton thread, in my experience, degrades pretty quickly. And so you can't really see the thread very well. But if you have a thread that you're uncertain about, if it's good enough to use, see if you can break it. That broke very easily. If you can break it at all, you shouldn't be using it to sew with because you don't want to construct a garment that will fall apart the first time you put any stress on the seams. Modern polyester thread, even old polyester thread from the thrift store, is very strong and doesn't break. Cheaper brands will have more lint. Better brands will have less lint. My favorite mid-range thread is Coats & Clark's Dual Duty XP. You can find it pretty much anywhere you can buy thread. There are more expensive threads, but I'm not really going to go on and on about thread. Just if you're looking for a recommendation, decent thread, reasonable price. This particular machine has a computer screen, which you really can't see very well there, and will make about 400 different types of stitches, some of which are shown up there. Every letter of the alphabet counts as a stitch, so that increases the number. And they do all sorts of fancy, wonderful things, and they're great, but you don't need to have a machine like this to enjoy sewing. I'm checking my list of things to talk about as we go along. All right. I want to say a word about needles also. You will have to replace the needle from time to time. It'll break, or you might want to change it with every new project. And needles are, the way the needle is oriented will vary from one type of machine to another. In this particular machine, the needle hole is in the front, and the needles have to be oriented that way in order for the stitch to form properly. So if you don't have a manual, it's really ideal if you check the orientation of the needle before you take the needle out. Now, if the needle hole is oriented side to side rather than front to back, you still have to know the correct orientation. If you get it in left to right when it's supposed to be right to the left, it won't make a stitch. So if you change a needle and it doesn't make a stitch, like it just doesn't pull the thread up from the bottom, check the orientation of the needle. Needles have a groove down the center here. And if you have any kind of fingernail at all, you can actually feel that groove and run your fingernail up and down inside the groove. It has a groove on the front side of the needle, doesn't have a groove on the back side of the needle. And let me show you something. And I have an illustration here that I pulled online that shows this long groove that runs down the center of the needle. Okay. I also recommend that you look for the YouTube search for a video by Threads Magazine called How a Stitch is Made. And it shows how the top thread and the bobbin thread are intertwined in what seems to me very much like magic to create the 2-thread lock stitch that a sewing machine makes. And once you understand what's going on under there, and we're going to go into that a little bit more, it makes certain things clearer to you. So that's a good search to look for. When you have watched that YouTube search, you will understand why when you remove your work from the machine, and we're going to move on now to this vintage machine. This came off my workbench. I have not restored it yet. I've sort of wiped the dirt off, and I don't have a needle in it, so we're just going to pretend about that. But let's imagine that we were sewing here. When you remove the work from the machine, the stitch formation has to be complete, or when you pull it off to the left here, you may see 3 threads instead of 2, and that means that it just hasn't finished yet, and that can cause you problems. So you solve that by always making sure that your needle is in the highest position before you remove the work. Now on this machine, we can see a lot of things that we can't see on the computerized machine, because they're on the computerized machine, all this stuff is hidden inside. But what we have going on up here is called the take-up lever. Yeah, the Morse is gorgeous. And when you have the take-up lever all the way to the top, your needle will be at the top, the cycle will be finished, and you can easily move the work off from the side. So in addition to knowing how the stitch formation process works, a vital thing to know is how these tensioners work on the front of the machine. Again, on the computerized machine, you can't see any of that. It's all the same things are happening, but it's all hidden inside the machine. What this does is regulate the flow of thread through the machine down to the needle to the point where it's going to interact with the bobbin thread underneath. So you're going to have a spool of thread. Again, the thread path will be very similar for all machines, but will differ from model to model slightly. So the thread starts here. It's going to go through a thread guide, and then it's going to drop down, wrap around the tensioner, come back up, and it's going to get, you're going to have to catch it on this check spring and continue the threading path. But all I'm going to talk about right now is the tensioner here. So the dial regulates the amount of pressure. These work by 2 convex discs that press together and create that tension on the thread. And this determines how much tension there is on the thread. The critical thing to know here is that, and I'm going to try to show you this as close up as I can. There's a presser foot lever in the back of the machine. And watch this as I move the presser foot lever. It's down now, and those convex discs are pressing together. When you thread the machine, you should always, 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 most important thing I can tell you, thread with the presser foot up. What that does is release those 2 discs a tiny bit, and it allows your thread to be seated properly in between them. If you thread with the presser foot down, then the thread is not in between those discs, and you may get something. And I did this sample for you where I had red sewing thread on the top, and I had black thread in the bobbin, and I deliberately made this happen. And this is what you get when your thread is not in between those discs. The slang term for this is thread nest or thread mess, and easily 90% of the tech support calls and emails I get from people are about this. So thread with your presser foot up, and if this happens to you, just unthread completely. And I always do that top and bobbin because it may have interfered with the thread flow while it was dealing with this underneath. So completely unthread, rethread, thread with the presser foot up, and hopefully this won't work. If you had your tension set all the way down to 0, that might happen. I see someone says they call it thread barf. That's a really good term for this. Okay. Give me a minute here. So when that happens, you can end up with a jam in this particular area. And if the hand wheel on the right side of the machine is frozen solid and it will not turn, almost always the cause is a thread jam underneath here. It's the opposite end of the machine, but that's just how it works. Another good reason to have the manual is that you need to know which direction to turn the hand wheel in. Most machines, you turn it towards you. If you turned it the other way while you were sewing, you could end up with a thread jam for that reason. So most of them turn towards you, but not all of them do. These are Rubbermaid kitchen turntables that I'm moving machines around on. I'm not going to see all the comments, but if I see one I can answer it quickly, I will. Okay, so when you have a thread jam underneath here, it will look like that, and you may have a hard time getting it out of the machine. You don't want to use any more force than is absolutely necessary. So you want to lift your presser foot. If possible, move the needle up. Again, there's no, I don't know how well you can see, but there's no actual needle in this machine. And then you want to just move it a little bit at a time and rock the hand wheel back and forth until you can get this free. You may need to reach under here with some very narrow, thin scissors. You might need to take, if the presser foot isn't caught up in the mess, take this off, it might help. There's a screw here that allows you to remove the presser foot, get some scissors under there and cut it away. And then you're also going to have to deal with this in the bobbin area, which we'll be looking at when we look at the underneath side of this particular machine. Another good practice when you're sewing is that you have it threaded up here. There's thread in the bobbin. You rotate the hand wheel that brings up the bobbin thread. Put your fingers on those two threads while you take the first couple of stitches, because that will keep the thread from being sucked down or pulled down into the bobbin area, which can also cause you problems. Unlike the computerized machines, these machines were made to last just about forever. This machine is made out of cast iron and steel. There's very little, I think that's plastic. There's very little, that's plastic. There's very little on here that could break or wear out. It has an external motor, which you can just replace the motor if you need to. And I won't have anything to say about motors tonight, because I don't know anything about motors. I know how to take one off and put a different one on. I am beginning the process of learning about motors, but you wouldn't want any advice from me yet about that. What I can tell you about is about cleaning them. Again, getting the lint out is extremely important. and we're going to be turning this machine over in a little while. So I'm going to demonstrate. Again, I have already removed the screws that were holding the throat plate in place. So I'm going to remove that. And then we have a slide plate that will allow you to access the bobbin area without turning the machine over while you're sewing. But I'm going to take this completely off because we're going to be looking at this from the underneath side of the machine. And these all work well, many of them work in a similar way. And to get this one off, I just need to rotate it a little bit because there's a springy metal piece here that slides underneath this part. And to get it back in, it's the same thing. I'm going to get it underneath that, rotate a little bit. I won't be demonstrating that, however. Okay. So these machines are meant to be maintained by the user. And what the sewing machine repair shop will charge you $100 for, you should be doing yourself on a regular basis. Now, how regular a basis depends on how much you sew. If you sew obsessively all the time, maybe once a week. If you sew regularly, maybe once a month. If you only get your machine out every once in a while, then before you start, if it's been sitting for several months, before you start again is a good time to oil it. And I am going to mention two products. One is just sewing machine oil. I like this container because the narrow spout means that I can get exactly where I want it. And it's just regular sewing machine oil. It really doesn't matter what brand you buy. However, if you've dug grandma's machine out and she's got a bottle of old sewing machine oil, check it for color. And if it's yellow, just don't use it. Buy some fresh sewing machine oil. The other thing that sewing machine repair people often recommend, and I bought a bottle of it and I end up just using the sewing machine oil, is called Tri-Flow Superior Lubricant. It's an oil that has a little Teflon in it and people swear by it. And I just haven't played around with it that much, but I'm just letting you know. This one does not have that spout feature, but if you have a bottle of something that doesn't have a skinny spout, you can use a toothpick or a bamboo skewer to put right at the place you want it, and then just drop a drop of oil on there and let it drop, let gravity carry it down to the exact location. Now, as I mentioned, this machine has a lot going on in there. And hold on for a minute. I'm going to put my headlamp on. Just a moment. And I hope that will help a little bit. If you have a manual, it should show you the places that need to be oiled. You don't need a manual, however. What you need is eyes and an understanding of what's happening. As you turn the hand wheel, you want to look down in there. I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to get the light down in there without shading it. You want to look down in there and see every place you can see metal moving against metal. I think over here in this direction, you should be able to see something. And I'm not going to demonstrate all of these. It's just too difficult to film, and every machine will be a little bit different. And every place that metal is rubbing against metal, not just turning by itself, but rubbing against metal, you want to put a single drop of sewing machine oil. You want to move all the levers and see how that makes things move. And I hope you can see there's movement there. And that's it. I mean, really, I was going to show you the nose of the machine also. So you're going to peer down in there and find all the places where metal is rubbing against metal and put one drop of sewing machine oil. What you don't want to oil is the drive belt, which is not, we can't see it in this machine. There is one, but we can't see it. And you don't want to put sewing machine oil in the motor. Okay. So as long as you leave those two things alone, you'll be fine. On this particular machine that makes all these fancy different kind of stitches. It has what's known as a cam system, where there's an arm that rides over the bumps in these round cams. And as the arm moves, it's going to move the needle and make the different stitches. You don't want to oil the cam either. Another place to look is in the nose of the machine. And again, I have to tape that to stay open, so give me a second there. Now I really need 3 hands for this, since the camera's not letting me zoom. So I'm going to show you the light now, and you look in there, but now I have to go back to the hand wheel, and you can see movement in there, I'm sure. It's the same story. You look for every single place where metal is moving against metal. As you turn the hand wheel, in this almost always towards you, check your manual, and wherever metal is moving against metal, you put a drop of oil. Now this oil is going to run down your needle onto whatever is underneath there. And that's why I said if you only sew occasionally, oil it up the night before you sew, leave a little piece of fabric or even a paper towel underneath the foot to let the oil run down onto that. And after you've oiled your machine, when you begin sewing, sew for a few inches, it doesn't take very long, on a scrap of fabric to let all that oil work its way down so that you're not staining the work that you're working on. Now we're going to turn the machine on its underneath side. If you have the machine mounted in a cabinet, this will be easy to do. If it's in a case, if it's in a vintage case, it's usually attached to the case on the sides, and also not that hard to do. And on the underneath side of the machine, there are several places where the manufacturer has made it very clear where the oil needs to go. So these holes here are telling you, put oil in here. Okay? And there are some over here as well. But I go beyond that, and I do exactly the same thing. I move the hand wheel. I look for every place where metal moves against metal. I put a drop of oil. That mechanism there, let's see, is moving. Well, I forget which lever that is. Okay. So just take your time, and you'll be amazed at the difference this will make. If your machine is sluggish, it's either the motor or the oiling, and it's probably the oiling. So give that a go first. Now let's talk about the bobbin area here. It's easier to do this. The bobbin may be oriented, this would be vertically, obviously, if the machine were vertical, or it may be oriented vertically, but off to the side. And with this particular machine, where it's oriented vertically and sort of parallel to the front of the machine, gravity is a big help when you're putting this in and taking it out. So this is a class 15 machine, which is a style that has a removable bobbin case. There's a latch here, which I'm going to have to get my hand in the way to remove it. And there's a little, an arm here that fits into a notch. So don't forget about that. So to remove the bobbin from the bobbin case, you pull it up with the latch. And while the latch is pulled up, it's holding the spool of bobbin thread in there, the little bobbin, and it's bobbin thread. So it makes it easier to put it in and out. You don't have to worry. When you release the latch, then the bobbin thread can fall out, spool of bobbin thread. As we peer down in here, we see 2 arms here that latch into place. And if you have a serious thread jam, or you're doing a maintenance that you haven't, a machine that hasn't been maintained for a long time, it's very easy to get this apart, and it's very easy to put it back together again. and I'm going to show you that, and then I'm going to tell you how to search for it on YouTube, because you're going to have to be looking through my fingers. So we're going to move these levers to the side, and there are two pieces in here, and I'm going to pull them both out at the same time by grabbing hold of this spindle that the hole in the bobbin case goes down over that spindle. So those will come out together. This is the gate that holds everything in place. And this is called the bobbin hook. So you take both of these out, and you use your lint brush and get all the lint out of there, and you use tweezers, and if there's any thread at all, even a little piece of thread can cause you heartache later on. So make sure this is very clean and getting all the lint and thread out. And then you're going to put it back together again. You're going to want to put a drop of oil, either, we see this half moon feature here. You're either going to put a drop of oil opposite from that on what we call the bobbin race, or you can put a drop of oil on the outside of the case where that's going to fit in. Now, the reason I say these are easy to put back together is you've got two half moons and you want to make a whole moon. So you're going to drop that back down in there. One-handed while holding a camera. Most of you won't be doing that. And when it's seated properly, you're going to know it. It's not going to be rattling around. It's going to be where it needs to be. And then you need to put the gate back in place. There's a little nub on the bottom here and a little notch for that nub right there. And the top of it has an opening that's going to let the needle go through it. So it's very easy to see how this goes back together. Can't believe how well that worked. And then you merely slide these latches around and you'll hear them click into place, I hope. And now you have done $100 worth of maintenance on your vintage sewing machine. Congratulations. You get a certificate. One more thing about these machines, the zigzag or multi-stitch machine is going to have a toothed gear somewhere where they, mesh together. Never mind. Like this. Sometimes it's on the top, sometimes it's on the bottom. In this particular machine, it's under here. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to be opening this up, but this was packed with a lubricant when it was manufactured. If it's on the top, it probably will just be coated with a lubricant. And what you need to know, and the only thing you need to know is has that hardened, or is it still doing its job, lubricating and staying on the gear at the same time? If it has hardened, then you need to get rid of it. And I use toothpicks or bamboo skewers. I try very hard not to use metal picks because I don't want to scratch the metal and cause a possible future problem. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do to get that old lube off of there. And then when you need to replace it, you need a clear lubricant, not lithium grease, which I hear hardens to a rock-like constituency. And the same brand, Tri-Flow, makes this thing that they call superior, whoops, sorry, that was the air oil. Tri-Flow clear synthetic grease, and this is recommended by other sewing machine repair people also. Now we have a Singer Model 66, one of the simplest sewing machines ever made. It has a drop-in bobbin. Actually, I've undone all this so we could see it easily without waiting for me to take it off. But it doesn't have a removable bobbin case. You just drop the bobbin down in there. It has no removable top. It does have a port in the back with a screw that you can take off and see the gear, not gears, but the mechanical workings in there. It is also meant to be maintained by the owner. And this one's almost 100 years old. And if we're lucky, we'll be able to see the oil holes. So a drop of oil in all of these oil holes. When it's been sitting for 40 or 50 years, I use 2 drops of oil. But if it's been maintained at any point in the recent past, 1 should do it. And there are oil holes here and here. And on this one, it has a screw where you can get a good look inside the nose of the machine. And just as on that other vintage machine, you move the hand wheel and you see the motion. Now, I dug this out from underneath my workbench earlier this week to demonstrate with it. And when I got it out, it had cobwebs on it. Literally, there were dead spiders underneath of it. And you would do the same thing on the underneath side. Turn it, see where it needs to be oiled, put a drop of oil there. And I could move it, but it took work to turn this hand wheel. I could exert force on it, I could turn it, and the needle would go up and down. And in 2 minutes, and 10 or 12 drops of oil, it was doing this. Just beautiful. This is what gets me. This is why I do what I do. I just love bringing them back to life. So old machines never die. If they're this old, there's very little go wrong with them. And most of the restoration I do is just long overdue maintenance. The biggest thing that can cause a problem is that sewing machine oil, over time, the volatile components will evaporate away and the screws will be stuck in there. The dried oil almost acts as a glue. And when that happens and you're working away, trying to get them loose, sometimes just a little vibrate, and again, there's no screw in there because I was preparing this. Just a little vibration will do the job. So just tap, 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 not whack, 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 but just tap, 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 tap. A little vibration on there may loosen that up. Another thing that you can use is a hair blow dryer. Put some oil on there, put some heat on there, tap it a little bit, try again. On a really stubborn machine, this can take a while. But once you get the screws off, then you have access to clean everything underneath. So, turn off my headlamp so I don't blind you when we come back. Okay, whoops. Yes, that's lovely, isn't it? Very great fashion accessory. So let me just run through a summary. If you keep your machine cleaned and maybe oiled, depending on the age and the type of machine that you have, you will prevent problems. If you thread with your presser foot up, that's the most important thing I can tell you. I can't guarantee you that that will solve all of your problems, but it solves 90% of the questions that I get. Hold those threads for the first 2 stitches. You don't have to grip them, just put your finger on them, keep them from moving. Don't push or pull the work as it's going through the machine. Let the feed dogs feed it, because if you push or pull, you can deflect the needle and cause it to break or to create a jam underneath. When you do get a thread jam, clear it carefully, rethread top and bottom, bobbin, and perhaps change the needle. And when there is a problem, I teach sewing, and I've seen 2 different approaches when a problem occurs while sewing, and everybody has problems. I've been sewing for, I don't know, 58 years now. They always occur. There's one type of person who wants to push down harder on the foot pedal and make it go faster and break through. That is not the right approach. a better approach is to stop immediately when you sense that there's a problem and fix the problem so that it doesn't get worse. So that's what I've had to say, and I hope you found some of that helpful. And I know that my colleague from Repair Cafe, North Carolina, Beccah, has a machine that's been sitting in a closet for a long time. Is Beccah around, Don? There she
Beccah is
is.
here. And
Hello.
Beccah, you're on. Oh, there we go.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I was just answering a chat in Q&A about 3-in-1 oil. And I know we've talked about this in a previous cafe, but 3-in-1 oil is not good for sewing machines. So I was just recommending answering that do buy sewing machine oil if you're in a pinch and you're like, oh, I don't have anything and I can't get to, the internet, or you can't get to like a Joann's or something really quickly. Clipper oil is actually the same thing as sewing machine oil. They are chemically, supposedly, about the exact same thing. It also should be clear. So what Cheryl said about it being clear and not yellow, definitely check beforehand. If it's yellow, don't use it. But they should be chemically very, very similar, if not the exact same thing, because they're just labeled differently.
That's a great tip. And never use WD-40.
Ooh,
and
no.
if you have used the wrong thing, if you're striking your forehead and saying, oh no, I used WD-40 last week, don't worry about it. Flush it out with sewing machine oil. Just, run some sewing machine oil through there. Sewing machine oil, new sewing machine oil will dissolve old gunked up sewing machine oil. And it will also help to flush out anything if you use the wrong thing.
And we actually got a great question from Menda, Australia for you, Cheryl. They wanted to know, does that headband hold your camera?
No, no. I was holding the camera in my hand. I practiced this ahead of time, and in camera mode, it would zoom, and that would have solved a lot of the glitchiness of the camera shots. But it didn't zoom in the Zoom meeting. So I was just waving the camera around with one hand.
Wonderful. Well, I am so impressed with your camera work. So onto the machine that I have. Many people are like me, sewing a lot of masks these days. And I have a machine that I use at home that's probably from like 2008, and it works fine. It's not fancy or anything like that, but I have a family member that has a Kenmore machine. Yeah, I have actually gone ahead and taken some of this off. So for those of you who are not Cheryl, it usually looks like this. So I've went ahead and taken the screws off and taken the plate off and set my screws aside. So most of you are probably dusting off your sewing machines, and I am doing the exact same thing with this one for the purpose of this demo. And I already went in and saw there is some fluff and stuff in here, even though it's been sitting in the closet for a couple of years. So that's definitely something we need to do. But one thing that I was chatting with Cheryl about is this machine runs a little fast. So you may find when you pull your sewing machine out that it runs a little differently than you were expecting. And so I don't actually know how to make my sewing machine run slower. So that's why I'm here today, modeling a question in real time to Cheryl. I don't know why this is running a little quickly. So I've unplugged it so that I'm safe. And I have taken this off, and I can go ahead and flip this so you can see the inside. And hopefully Cheryl will be able to give me a hand.
Well, you can just put that right back where you got it. Now that you can see all the places to oil it. And what we want to see now, Beccah, is the foot pedal. It's technically called the motor controller, because the fastness is coming from the motor. So if you'll get that foot pedal up here. Now,
I can do that.
I've already explained that I don't know anything about motors, because I don't know anything about motors. But when Beccah showed me a photo of her foot pedal, I thought I saw a screw on there somewhere, Beccah.
I bet you did. Let's see here.
Like look in between. Yeah, right there. It's looking right at me. Okay?
Yeah. So when you press down, this actually prevents you from going a little faster.
Yes. So if you just rotate that screw so that it's taller, then you won't be able to press the foot pedal down as much, and it won't sew as fast. That's my theory.
I think
And
this
I
is
know there are
brilliant.
machines that have that feature. And you talk about a simple fix. You
Cheryl, you
couldn't
just
get a
blew my
simpler
mind.
solution than that one. I'd like to say a word about your Kenmore, if you don't mind.
Oh, please. Would you like it on camera?
Yeah, put it back up on camera again. So the golden age of sewing machines was post-World War II, when the Japanese got permission to copy some of our models to rebuild their industry in a non-military way. And then they made all sorts of improvements. And then they outcompeted us. And that's a long story, very interesting long story. So because the Japanese were outcompeting us, starting in the mid-1960s, US manufacturers started cheapening their production lines and using more and more plastic parts. Now, what I'm about to tell you is my guess as to what happened, because what I have observed is that Kenmores from the 1970s were excellent machines, and by that time, Singers were, I'm sorry to say, really not very good anymore. They were still making some good models, but the newer models that came in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, were very disappointing, shall we say. But Kenmore kept making really good machines, and with new features like this free arm that we see here, that you could slide a pants leg onto that. There's probably a piece that you can make a flatbed out of it. Yeah, okay. You slide that in place and you have a regular flatbed. You slide it out of the way and you can put a sleeve or a pants leg on there. And that's an amazingly helpful feature that only came around in the 1970s. My theory is that Kenmore was the Sears brand, and Sears wasn't manufacturing anything. Other companies were. And Sears used to stand behind, very firmly behind, the products that they sold. And I think they told the manufacturers to keep using metal gears and whatnot. And so if you have a Kenmore from the 1970s, you have a peachy machine, a potentially peachy machine. So that's my thumbs up for Kenmores.
I would also give this a thumbs up. This has been in the family, not my personal sewing machine that I ever learned on or anything, but they've had it for quite a while. And it has served them very, very well.
I'm not surprised. Great machines.
Yeah, and it also hums a little bit because...
No, I think they all have their own song.
They do.
Every model has a different song that it sings.
Yeah, so this should solve the problem, and I can run a test stitch, but I don't know that that's going to be really useful for anyone on camera. Okay. Is there anything that, question for Cheryl, is there anything that if somebody has a machine like this that they're pulling out that you think maybe you didn't cover in your earlier section, Cheryl?
I would say that if the machine, if the motor smokes a little bit, if it's been sitting in a closet for a long time, you want to be testing it in a safe place, but don't worry about that too much. It may just burn a little dust off. If clouds of gray smoke come out of the motor, unplug it and take it somewhere. But a spark or two that you can see and a little smell of burning dust at the beginning is, you shouldn't worry about that. Just make sure that it doesn't continue.
Excellent. One thing that I thought I would add on is on modern sewing machines, when you put your thread, and I also, shameless plug for dual duty, not shameless, I don't have any stock in dual duty or anything, but I also use that as my preferred thread. I found that it is the most sturdy for when I I'm sewing, but I also
Yep.
pick out my own stitches a lot, and this is the hardest one for me to pick out.
Oh, that's
It helps me do it right the first time. I don't know if, so some older machines, they don't have little things to put on top here for you to hold your thread in, but modern machines do. They have like a little cap that you put over. And different machines have some do, some don't. It depends on your thread. And I've actually sewn too quickly. Not that I would ever sew too quickly or be rash or anything like that, but I have sewn too quickly and had my thread go flying off.
Yes.
And I've had this happen a lot on more modern machines. They tend to have plastic rungs here, and they vibrate a lot more, I have found. And so my solution is, if you don't have one of those little plastic caps that goes over the top, or your machine didn't come with one, I use a little rubber band. And on this one, obviously I cannot do that. But on any taller ones, I will put my thread on and just rotate a little rubber band around it. Is it a good long-term fix? Absolutely not. But if you're pulling your sewing machine out after not using it for 5 or 10 years, that is a good solution. If you're trying to like, oh, I just need to make, my grandkid a mask or something, or my neighbor or whatever. It's a good short-term solution.
That's a great idea. I have another, not really a fix, but just a suggestion. Take a drinking straw and make a longer post so that it can vibrate up and down a little bit on the post without flying off.
That's brilliant.
I saw a very good question that I wish I had included in one of the participants here, name of Stephanie. And she said that it has been recommended to her to keep a vintage machine on a power strip and to turn it off when you're done. And oh my God, thank you, Stephanie. I really should have said that. The reason you want to do that is that with the foot pedal or motor controller on a vintage machine, there's a little bit of power running to them all the time. This is what I've been told. I haven't tested this myself. And so when you have it on a power strip, and if you have like an extra light, I like those little IKEA gooseneck lights to put light right where I want it. And I keep the light turned on all the time to remind me, it's like a sentinel. I do the same thing with my iron to remind me to turn it off when I'm finished and not to leave power running to that machine all the time. It's a great tip. And thanks, Stephanie, for reminding us.
We got another request for the name of the thread, and I went ahead and put that in the chat, but it's just Dual Duty Thread by Coates and Clark. And there are as many thread brands as there are blades of grass, I feel like. So
some of them are extraordinarily expensive. There are also specialties, all kinds of specialty threads. There's threads just for machine embroidery. There are threads for sergers. There are threads that look just like the thread on your jeans. There are heavy duty threads. There are upholstery threads. I would just say, so I'm not going to talk a lot about threads, but if you have a spool of thread that says button and carpet thread, don't use that in your sewing machine. It has a waxy coating that can build up on the workings. Same thing for hand quilting thread that has been pre-waxed ahead of time. Lots of threads, lots of different types of needles, etc. We could talk for hours.
We could.
But we won't.
But we won't. If you're looking for like, oh, I need to just, sew a mask, a good one, it doesn't have to be this brand, but you want to look for something that says all purpose. It can be cotton or polyester. I think that some mask patterns have like a specific thread on them and you can just follow that, but all purpose, I have very rarely not used all purpose thread. Maybe I've used other threads when I've been sewing silk or maybe rayon.
Right.
Which I don't enjoy to do, so I don't do very often.
All-purpose thread will cover just about everything. The same thing goes for needles. There are all sorts of specialty needles, and that is another topic that we could talk for at least an hour about. My default setting is a universal tip. It'll say universal on the package, and a size 14. Which is not so big that it'll make extra large holes in your fabric and not so small that it will tend to break easily. So a size 14 universal needle is what I use most of the time, except for, special things. There's special needles for leather. There's special needles for machine embroidery, but a size 14 universal, general purpose.
I will second,
Cheryl,
third, and
Beccah?
fourth that. Yes.
I would like to give our guests a chance to ask some questions.
Yeah,
So,
great.
with our time remaining, I know we have a lot of questions that appeared in the chat and some of the Q&A questions, which we can maybe try to get to later, maybe offline. But if folks want to ask a question verbally, we can turn on your microphone.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun.
You can ask a question to Cheryl and Beccah. So the way we'll do that is in your software, you should see an option to raise your hand. It may be under the More menu, or it may be if you can see the participants panel or the panelists panel, you may have a button that says raise hand. You can go ahead and click that button, and then I can call on you and you can ask your questions. So would anybody like to do that? Okay, so Hannah, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, I just learned about 4 things after sewing for like 50 years. So thank you. But my question is,
You made my day.
recently my machine started ticking, and I do have the manual. It's about a 25-year-old Singer. I have the manual, but there's not one mention of maintenance in the manual. Do you have any recommendations?
Do you know the model number of your Singer?
I do.
What is it?
It's 9410.
Okay, that is the manufactured a long time after 1964. So it's got a lot of plastic parts in there. It's the reason I restore antique and vintage machines is because I don't have to replace too many parts, because they don't break. And I'm sorry, I really don't know the answer to your question.
Well, like I said, I've just learned a lot of things, so I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I
Thank
would
you.
check. This is like a really maybe easy answer, and it may not, but I've had ticking before in a couple of my machines, and I have found it is bobbin related, and it may not be at all, but I have had some ticking, particularly with plastic bobbins, and I couldn't give you a good reason why. If it's a more consistent ticking in line with as your sewing machine is ticking around, it could be that. Then again, it could be something else entirely, but it's worth giving a shot, maybe trying a different type of bobbin and seeing if that ticking changes.
Perfect. Thank you.
You might also see if you can find a Facebook group for your particular machine. It could be the bobbin case, which may not be removable like the one that I showed you, but actually built into the machine. If that's made of plastic, those can be replaced. So that's just a couple things to think about.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. And Hannah, where are you calling in from tonight?
I'm from Mid-Hudson Valley, New York.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for calling. And then we're going to take a question from Lorraine. Lorraine, are you there?
Yes. Hi.
Oops, sorry. Wait a second. The buttons are on the controls here are a little tricky. I'm sorry. Let's see. It won't let me unmute you, Lorraine. Hold on a second.
Okay. How about
there
that?
you are. Yep, you're good. Okay, go ahead.
I have a FAF Performance 2056.
Okay.
It's about 15 years old. I mainly quilt with it. And recently I noticed that when I take my bobbins out to reload the bobbins are kind of chewed up on the edge. They're plastic bobbins. And does it. Sometimes it doesn't do it. I don't hear any noise. There's no problems with the stitches. It's just, I take the bobbin out and they're a little bit chewed up and I don't know why. And I brought it to be serviced for that problem and they couldn't figure out why either.
Oh, well, all I can say is that FAF makes extraordinarily good machines. And hopefully the FAF dealer ought to be trained to work with them And if that person can't, you're not likely to get much more help from me. I would use the fingertip test. Like run your fingertip around inside the bobbin case, even if it's a built-in bobbin case, and see if you feel protuberance or something that you could smooth down with a little, if it's metal, with a little sandpaper. You're using plastic bobbins?
Yes.
Yes. Bobbins are cheap.
Yes, I do. I'm buying a lot of bobbins.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry. I can't help you.
And I did learn a lot today too.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Lorraine. And we're going to take a question from Peter. Peter, do you have a question for Cheryl and Beccah? No, Peter may have just had his hand up. Peter, are you there? Sorry, let's see.
I didn't mean to raise my hand, sorry.
Oh, okay, not a problem. All right, thanks, Peter.
I'd like to say one quick thing about bobbins that I saw a comment, again, scroll by, and that is there are two very common types of bobbins, class 66 and class 15. And the 15s are dead flat and the 66s are a little bit shorter and curved. And then some machines take their own bobbins. FOP has their own bobbin system. Bernina has their own bobbin system. But if you put a class 15 bobbin in a class 66 machine, it will jam. You can get away often with running it the other way around, but making sure that you have bought the correct bobbins for your particular machine is important.
Okay, now we're going to take a question from Kate. Let's see. Kate, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Kate, where are you calling from tonight?
I'm calling from Cary, North Carolina, not too
right
far.
Down the street.
I have a FOF 1527, and I've been making a lot of masks, and I seem to end up having to change my tension a lot. Like it just gets like I keep having to make it lower and lower or higher and higher, and I'm wondering if I'm doing something wrong, or what is it about it that it gets so bad that I'm like, okay, I've done something wrong, and I take it in and get it serviced.
Yeah, there are things that are more repair rather than maintenance related. Right. And it could be that the overall tension mechanism needs to be tightened up a little bit. And if you're, then the machine from that era should, again, that should be a fantastic machine. And I would check a Facebook group or a bulletin board group for specific help. It's the kind of thing that I would try myself, but not everybody likes working on machines. So have you had it into a shop?
Yeah, I took it in once, and I noticed just in this last batch I've been working on that I had to start messing with the tension again. I was like, oh, yeah. It's starting to do something again. So.
Yeah, it sounds like something's loosening up that it shouldn't be loosening up. Like with the vibration of the machine, it sounds like something might be loosening up.
Right.
But without looking at the machine, I couldn't tell you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. This has been really very informative.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks.
And now we'll take a question from, let's see, hold on a second. As I said, the software can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Okay, Christine, can you hear us? Or can you, let's see. There we go, try that. Okay, Christine, one more time. Christine, do you have a question? No. Okay. Does anybody else would like to raise their hand and ask a question? Okay. We have a couple of questions that were posted on the chat, and actually one from Karen in Australia. Let me actually, let's see. Karen, are you there? You can unmute your microphone. There you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, how are you, everybody?
Good.
The question I'd like to ask, Cheryl, is those swivel stands,
Yeah.
are they self-made or do you buy them?
The one that I had the vintage Singer on, the wooden one, someone made that and I bought it out of swap meet. The plastic ones are Rubbermaid kitchen turntables. And let me see if I can, okay. So that one is a homeowner's do-it-yourself one. This is just an ordinary Rubbermaid, a large Rubbermaid kitchen turntable. I took an old cutting mat and cut it down to the size. And I usually use these when I'm trimming up quilt blocks to size. You know, I can lay them against this grid here. And the same thing for the one that I have the modern Janome on. Same Rubbermaid turntable, just with a different color cutting mat cut to size in there.
You wouldn't sew on those?
No, that was just for the purposes of demonstrating here.
Thank you very much, Cheryl.
That's a good question. I'm glad somebody asked that question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Been
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Don.
Sewing on
Thank you,
those would be
Karen.
like an Olympic sport.
And I think Christine, would you like to try again and ask your question about the presser foot? No? Okay. Let's see, we're going to take Pico's call. Let's see, Pico, are you there?
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, yes, we can hear you.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I have a question that is maybe more general, not so much about sewing machines. I really enjoyed your presentation. I'm curious about how much prep time you spent just getting ready. I mean, it doesn't seem as though you're nervous or that you're following some sort of a script, but it's just gone really smooth. And I'm wondering how much time you spent getting ready for this.
Okay. Here's my script. There is a script.
Yes, I noticed there were some paste ups on the wall. Right. Okay. All right. I didn't see those.
Okay.
All right.
I taught at colleges and universities for almost 40 years. And that's why I'm not nervous, because I've talked to huge groups of people before. And I can't see any of you anyhow. So I don't know, the size of the group doesn't matter. I spent a considerable amount of time on this. I enjoyed every minute of it. I retired in 2008, so it's been a long time since I put together a presentation. Plus, I'm in lockdown. I'm avoiding everybody who isn't in my family bubble. We're all being very, very careful. So I had the time. I enjoyed doing it. Thank you for asking your question. It's nice to have that effort recognized. And I'd like to thank specifically two of my friends who participated in 2 run-throughs of this with me, Missy and Linda, who are both, they both also repair and restore vintage and antique sewing machines. And so I ran through this first with Missy, got notes from her, improved it, and then again yesterday with Linda, got more notes from her and her hilarious husband, who had some really off-the-wall suggestions, like just drop it in a bucket of oil. Thank you, Missy, and thank you, Linda, if you're here.
Okay, thank you, Pico. So I'm going to see if I can ask Cheryl and Beccah a couple questions that have come up in the online Q&A. Here's a question from Megan Descoli. I have a machine from the 60s. The machine doesn't seem to have the power to sew through material if it's even moderately thick or folded over for seams. I have tried a thicker needle, it didn't work. Specifically, I was trying to sew a baby outfit out of a thick fleece. Do you think this is a repair issue or just a lack of power issue?
If it's happening on different types of fabric, it could be a lack of power issue, and that could be the motor. As the internal parts of the motor wear down, you may get less power. Again, this is not my area, but I have a Bernina that just laid down and died. And Missy actually opened up the motor for me and showed me what needed to be done. And I just need to be more confident to do it. If it's just the fleece, you might loosen up the tension a little bit. When you have very thick fabric, you've got to get the top thread and the bobbin thread, you know, meshed together. And if it's really thin fabric, that's a short distance. And if it's thick fleece, that's a thicker distance. So I would say start by trying loosening the tension a little bit. And then if it's a machine from the 60s that has an external motor on the back, as you saw with the blue Morse here, you can replace the motor for about $50. So just a thought.
And I guess
or you can get it worked on probably for less than that. I just don't know. I don't know about motors much.
On a similar point, some folks have asked about replacing the belt. Is there an indication of when should the belt be replaced? Is that a common item?
It should be replaced when it breaks, or it starts shedding, you know, particles, and you see all this black gunk on the outside of your machine. If you can catch it before it breaks, you can measure it, or if it's broken cleanly and not just disintegrated, you can measure it to replace the right size. There's a controversy about whether stretchy rubber belts are good or not, and many of the sewing machine gurus just foam at the mouth at the thought of stretchy rubber sewing machine belts. But the one training class I taught from a very respected sewing machine guru, he was all about the rubber belts. So that gives you a little bit more wiggle room. And when you replace the belt, you want to get it not too tight. It's got to be tight enough to grip the hand wheel and the little round thing on the motor that goes around. I'm sure it has a name. I don't know what it is, but not super tight. So just tight enough to grip those things. And you can, the motor mount here can be adjusted up and down somewhat. So you get a belt close to the right size, and then you can move all that up and down to get it just the right amount of tension on that belt. Good question.
Okay, thanks. Here's another question from Eileen. I own a Husqvarna Viking Model 630. The reverse button has become sticky, gummy. Is this something I should attempt to clean or better to take to a professional? The machine is almost 30 years old, still works great.
Yeah, that is another really excellent brand. And if you can get to the back side, you know, if you can look up into your machine and see the back side and see where that works, you might be able to clean it. I haven't mentioned alcohol yet because it can damage the finish, especially of an antique machine, in a heartbeat. One of the machines from the 60s with a good clear coat on it, probably pretty safe, but alcohol will dissolve that old sewing machine oil better than anything else in my experience. And if you do use alcohol to remove the gunk, to free something up, follow it immediately with sewing machine oil because you don't want it freezing back up in place. So my answer is maybe. Give it a try. What do you have to lose? I don't think you'll, on a machine of that era, if you can get to it, I don't think you'll hurt anything by trying it. Don't sue me.
If you are wanting to clean something with a little bit of alcohol, we've talked about this before on the cafe. A Q-tip is your friend. Don't saturate it because like Cheryl mentioned, if you do get that alcohol other places, especially in older machines, you'll hurt it. I have an old Singer upstairs that is beautiful and amazing and has this amazing wooden carrying case. And I would never use alcohol on that.
Right.
So
yes.
So of the two that the three that she showed today, one of those, don't put any alcohol on that.
Right.
And you can get alcohols that have a little bit lower of a proof. It evaporates very quickly. So, like maybe 50% instead of 70%, that would totally be an
Good thought.
option. If you're feeling a little nervous, or, if I'm ever feeling nervous about my machine, I am nowhere near as much of an expert as Cheryl is. I do take mine in for servicing. I've had some people were mentioning thread barf earlier. I've had that happen to me before and I couldn't figure out why. And after trying standard things, I took it in. So, and it turned out it was a good thing I did, because I have no idea what they did to fix it, and it needed it. So, yeah, just my 2 cents. Do we have more questions, Don?
Yeah, we do. We have a question from Chuck and Carla. And Chuck is one of our repair coaches. Hey, gang. And you're live. Go for it.
Hey, really getting a lot out of this, so thanks. I have a Singer model 5910, which is basically late 80s vintage when I got it new. And the last few years, I've gotten so frustrated with it. My dear husband bought me a year and a half ago. What I want to try to do is get this machine functional so that I could pass it on to someone else. And the problem seems to be needle alignment. I can't even use the zigzag on it anymore because the needle is shifted off to one side. I took it in for repair a couple of times and they were like, we can't do anything about it. Is it hopeless? Do I have a boat anchor here, or is there something that can be done for it?
That's repair rather than maintenance and restoration. I mean, that's clearly a repair issue.
Right.
Is the alignment of the needle. On the Facebook or bulletin board groups, they often not only have user manuals, they sometimes have service manuals that their members have uploaded. So that's a place for you to look. Okay. Also, not all repair shops are created equal. The guys that, and it was all guys, sorry ladies, it was all guys back in the day. The ones that trained thoroughly, they're all over 80 now. I'm quite serious about that. At 71, I'm too young to have even done that kind of work, had anyone let me do it, which they wouldn't have back in the day. So, you call the repair shop and say, how old is your repair guy? If the answer is 85, you've got a good chance. It's not in many shops' interest to fix a machine like that. It just depends on the ethics of the repair shop. Why should they spend, 2 hours on something that, when they really would much rather have you buy a new machine. So look for a service manual in a good bulletin board or Facebook group.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, unless we have any other last minute questions, I think we may start to wrap up. So just kind of a last call, if anybody wants to raise a hand with a question.
We have quite a few on our Q&A still, our Q&A chat.
It is a little hard to keep track of, but let's see. Okay, so Peter raised his hand, and then Beccah, if you see a question that you want to field, let's do that. So first of all, let's see. Peter, do you have a question?
Yeah, so what I wanted to ask was, I agree with you that the golden era of sewing machines was post-World War II up to the mid-70s or maybe even the early 80s. Would you recommend would you recommend buying one of those over buying a new machine? And if you're in a flea market or a yard sale or something like that, is there some sort of litmus test you can do right there?
Yes, that is a great question. In a heartbeat, I would recommend that. Modern machines are made out of plastic. The inexpensive ones that you buy are, and I am not kidding you, designed to last 18 months of use. 18 months. These old ladies and gentlemen will last. I mean, the Singer that I showed you from 1928, there's no reason that shouldn't sew for 200 or 300 years more. Seriously. The great vintage ones from the post-war era, the Japanese did the best job. Well, I take that back. Some higher end manufacturers like Pfaff and Bernina and Necki and Husqvarna, they made fantastic machines. But people know that, and you're more likely to have to pay a bigger premium price for that. But a good post-war Japanese zigzagger or multi-stitch machine like this Morse, you ought to be able to get it for a reasonable price. There's a good chance you can fix it up yourself if you're the tiniest little bit handy. And they will run for the rest of your life, in my humble opinion. And I'm not the only person that feels that way. You see this opinion popping up again and again and again. I do have modern machines that have cost me thousands of dollars that do very specific things. I actually have a Pfaff that would cost $5,000 to replace, but I paid $5 for it at a thrift store, probably my best modern machine. And they do all sorts of really nifty things. But for a machine, you know, what do most people want? They want a straight stitch and a zigzag. And most of the other stuff, you know, making the needle go up and down automatically. Well, it takes 1 second to turn the hand wheel and do that. So, sorry, you stepped on, it's not a sore point, it's a happy point for me. And I'm like a missionary and I want to convert all of you. So, yeah, Bernina, I don't think I mentioned Bernina. They made excellent machines. Vintage Berninas are probably the most sought after vintage machines. So, yeah.
And so you're at a flea market or you're at a yard sale, you're at a Goodwill, and there's a machine from the 70s. There's a 70s Kenmore. How do you, what should you do to like make sure, well, I'm not buying a total dog here?
That's a good question. If they will let you take the top off and look inside, do you see plastic gears? Forget it. If it's all metal in there, great. There may be plastic cams like we saw on the Morse, and I didn't do a close-up of that, but there's actually a crack in that plastic cam stack. So it will last a certain amount of time and then it will be gone. Other ones have metal cams in there. So look into the innards if you can. And if it has plastic, just don't buy it. If you have the patience to wait until you find a good one. When you pick it up, if it weighs 40 pounds, there's a good chance that it's all metal. The less it weighs, the less it's worth. An exterior motor can be replaced very easily. And like I said, for a brand new one for about $50. Yeah, I think that, any other questions about that? That was a great question.
No, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
We do still have just 2 short ones open in the Q&A, Dawn, if you want to hear.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Cheryl Bryce is asking, a friend is having trouble getting her bobbin thread to be taken up on a Singer 247.
Okay, a 247. I'm very familiar with the 237. I'm not familiar with the 247. I would say to check the orientation of the needle and make sure you have the needle in. Try, if it's in, you know, facing one side, flip it 180 and face the other direction and see if that will work. Off the top of my head, that's my best guess. The other thing that can happen with needles is that they slide up into a little slot, and if there's wear up there in that little slot, it may be going too far up into the little slot, and you might pull it down a tiny little bit. Or it could be a timing issue. Now, what I have heard over and over again is that the most frequent thing that an unscrupulous repair person in a shop will tell you is that your timing is off and that the timing has to be reset. Of all the vintage machines I've ever worked on, and it's probably 150 now. I haven't finished all of them, but you know, I've had acquaintance with probably 150. I've had 2 or 3 that had timing problems. On the vintage machines, I know less about modern machines. So moving the needle up a little farther, maybe there's some gunk up there that you could take a toothpick and clean out the hole that the needle goes into. Try that, or try pulling it down just the tiniest little bit and see if that helps.
All right, I'm just going to type this out real quick while I ask you the next question, which you can answer, Cheryl. Is
Okay.
Cheryl located in the Triangle? The answer to that
I'm in
is
Hillsborough, North Carolina.
yes.
Hillsborough.
If yes, will she come to a repair cafe when we can meet in person again?
Yes, I was a repair cafe volunteer. I'm still a repair cafe volunteer. Hi, I'm here right now. And I will be a repair cafe volunteer post-pandemic. But I don't anticipate that being anytime soon, by the way. Like a year or more, maybe?
Yeah, we're not expecting to reconvene in person in 2020. So we're looking to 2021, and hopefully we'll be able to work with our hosting partners to establish a new calendar. But we don't have anything to announce yet.
Barbara also wanted to know, her brother machine has always had a tension problem and she's not been successful in fixing it. Do you have a sewing machine repair that you recommend in the Triangle?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. And the reason is that at any given time, I have between 80 and 100 machines here in my house, to my daughter's despair. They don't live with me anymore. They're afraid they're going to get left with all of them when I eventually go to this great sewing machine repair shop in the sky. And I just can't afford to take them anywhere. So I either figure it out for myself, or I put them back on the shelf and I wait until I develop more skill set to deal with them.
Wonderful.
Sorry. There was a good guy, and I had a problem that I couldn't solve. And I called and they said, well, he's over 90 now, and his son is in his 70s, and he's retired also. So the good old sewing machine guys are no longer with us generally.
All right, we have one last one. And I think, Dawn, you were hoping to get Christine on a little earlier. So she's actually stuck this in the Q&A. And she says, I have a Kenmore 385 and the presser foot, when the presser foot is lowered, it's lowered all the time. The lever that usually lifts the presser foot does not lift it at all.
Okay. Again, that's repair rather than maintenance. And you said a Kenmore 385?
Yes.
I think you said that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that should be an older machine, and you should be, if you are inclined to use a screwdriver yourself, I would guess, I'm not familiar with that specific model, you should be able to look at it and see what has gone wrong by moving the presser foot lever up and down. Maybe something is out of place, maybe something needs to be tightened up. It is a repair that I would attempt myself, and would have at any time. I'm seeing the names of my friends in here, and I'm loving it. Hi, Misako.
I think that is all of our Q&As, and I'm going to shamelessly say I have learned so much tonight, and I am so very thankful for you, Cheryl. This has been fantastic. I'm sure many other people have as well.
Thank you. It's called obsession is what it is.
Well, your obsession has benefited many of us tonight. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that. Appreciate it. Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cheryl. It was an excellent presentation, and clearly a lot of effort went into it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And, I enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you.
And thank you to all of our other coaches as well, even though you guys were all mostly quiet this evening. For those of you who have not attended our events in the past, we often get a wide variety of questions, and all of our coaches have different areas of expertise. So in future events, you'll hear them be much more chatty than we are tonight. But definitely sewing machines are definitely Cheryl's thing. So we go to her with all of them. And so in that, I'd like to wrap up. As I mentioned earlier, we have additional events coming up. One in 2 weeks, which is focused on jewelry, being hosted by Kathy Murphy. And then in September, we'll be talking about glue. If you want to learn more about Cheryl's work, you can check out her blog, Dragon Poodle Studio. That's a unique enough phrase, you can just Google it and she'll be the first hit. And then you can also learn more information about our events at repaircafe.tv. And on that site, we list not just our own North Carolina-based events, but we do list events that occur elsewhere around the world. And we do list events from other organizations. So Fix-It Clinics in particular, this past weekend, they hosted an event out of Sweden, and they answered a variety of different questions there. And so as throughout the pandemic and afterwards, we'll try to list these events so people can see them and participate in them. So thanks very much again, and we're going to sign off, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks.
Thanks
It's
so
wonderful.
much.
It's great.